So, hi, folks. Hello once again, and you're very welcome along to another program, to another edition of Down Your Way. Well, if this is not a special program, I don't know where it is. I'm all the way in Dublin. I'm all the way in the Liberties. I'm here with Alice Leahy. Look, it's a real privilege to be here, and we want to congratulate you on all your awards and all your work. You invited us here a couple of weeks ago, and Sean Donovan is here with me today. And you know Sean quite well. I grew up beside you.
Yeah, up the road, up the road. But I suppose what I'm very conscious of you coming here today, you're coming from a very different environment. And I must say, local radio, I think, is huge. And we have people who are sitting up there now who come into us for batteries to put in their radio, to listen to the radio. And of course, I've often been on with Fran and do say hello to him. But I think it's a wonderful service. And I'm delighted you came up, but I'm very conscious it's a very different space up here than from where you came from.
And you have small space as well. Quite
We
small.
have.
Yes,
Very
ma'am.
small.
Very
It's
small.
a tiny premises. We're in the base. We would be, I would say, probably the smallest agency working with people who are homeless. There will always be homeless people. We own no property. The only property we own is a burial site in Glasnevin that was given to us by the Glasnevin Trust. And actually, another Tipperary man, Mervyn Colville, a neighbour down the road in Anskiff from where I lived, was instrumental in getting us that plot. And we have 5 people buried up there who would have been just buried in a pauper's plot if we didn't get that.
No, we're joined as well by the Assistant Commissioner.
We are. We have two great friends of ours over the years. There's Assistant Commissioner, Garda Commissioner McElgun, and we met him first when he was Chief Superintendent in Kevin Street. And he came in to us. He has sat at this very table. He met the people coming in here, and he also ensured that we got down to Templemore, and we're due another visit to chat with the guards coming out, because actually the guards, when they come, a lot of them, we still think that they have wonderful training, they have great support, but they have to still deal with what life is like in a different environment.
Absolutely. And you have Jarlath Daly
Well,
as well.
Jarlath, of course, is Sculpture to the Stars, and we know Jarlath for years. He works up the road. He's a marvelous sculptor, but he has been wonderful to us. And Jarlath, and if I could also say that Mary, Jarlath's wife, was a wonderful teacher, a former principal in Ballyfermot, but she's from Donegal.
And Jarlath, of course, is from Tipperary Town.
Jarlath is from Tipperary Town.
Yes.
Jarlath, you might
Yeah.
give a bit of your history.
We'll link into Jarlath in a bit.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to me about your grown-up years in Feathert.
Well, are you going to stay here until 5? Well, I think when I grown up in Feathert, I mean, I did a memoir and I look back on growing up, and I suppose the older you get, you reflect on your growing up. I grew up in Anskift. We didn't own the house we grew up in. We grew up in the estate of Olivia Hughes and her husband Jack. My father was the steward there, and his father before him. But we never felt, them and us, I felt every blade of grass was mine, and that building was mine. There was a sense of Olivia Hughes involved us in drama, in music, in art, she also got a Macronatua club going in a part of their house. Now, in that house, in that room, we had question times, we had debates, we had arguments, we had wonderful things going on. And then I had a project, and I had it in their orchard. Of course, Anskift has changed now, like so much in rural Ireland, even though I still feel the bridge going into Anskift is one of my favourite places in Ireland.
You went to the local convent.
I did, but before that I went to the national school. And I would think the national school was the school I enjoyed most. But we went up through the fields. I went to school through the fields, like Alice Taylor, and I'm sometimes mistaken for her with my grey hair, but she's a Cork woman. I went to school through the fields, and we'd call into Godfrey's on the way up, and Mrs. Godfrey used to make a big apple pie. And I think they got the first television. They got it before ours anyway. We'd go up and sit on the floor and look at whatever was going on. And then we go to school. And then I remember David Mara and myself, we had an argument one day, I think outside the well, when we were picking up, because we had to pick up the the kindling for the school. But I did like Mrs. Ryan. Now, a lot of people would have known Jimmy Ryan. Jimmy used to go to Cheltenham, and I think or Ascot, wasn't it, and give the shamrock to the Queen Mother. And Mrs. Ryan was she was from Kerry. And I think she was a woman before her time. I remember her, she always had this thing about sitting, and it wasn't about sitting quietly. Now, others would have a different experience, but this is mine. Sitting quietly in the classroom. But I think and switching off for a few minutes, but I think she was encouraging us to just sit back and be calm. I don't think it was kind of, go on, you need to behave yourself. And then I went to the nuns. And of course, I think it was the first time we cycled to school. And it was the first time that I saw, you couldn't play tennis because you couldn't drive, you couldn't cycle back in, or you couldn't play music. And I think these are all things we should all be able to do. But I think the Macronatuha group and Olivia Hughes and my mother were the founder members of the first branch of Country Markets, and that was in Feathert. And people forget about that. And I remember my mother saying to me not long before she died, she's 11 years dead now, she said, well, there's a big difference between Country Markets, which is a cooperative movement, and the farmers' markets, because the farmers' markets are all about you yourself going in with your produce, but whereas Country Markets was you were putting back some money into a cooperative, and it was to help women at the time. But anyway, I think what I learned most wasn't actually in school. I think it was the wider community I grew up in. All of us neighbours, and I had a project, and a project was about monitoring everything, keeping records. I had guinea pigs, and we used to rear the guinea pigs, and you'd make sure they had carrot leaves and they were looked after. And then I would put them, you had to document everything, and you put them into a cardboard box and cycle into the railway, and we had a railway. The railway should never have been got rid of. The more I look back on our life, we got rid of the beet factories, we got rid of the small schools, we got rid of the small hospitals, but we won't go there. It's too early in the day to be getting negative.
You became a nurse.
I did, but there was a lot more before that.
There was. There was a ton of stuff.
Yeah, but I need to finish about the guinea pigs, because it was part of the time. You put the guinea pigs on the train, and then you went to the post office to get them to send a telegram up to Trinity to collect the guinea pigs. So the poor guinea pigs got a sad arrival in Dublin. I trained as a nurse in Baggot Street. It's all documented in my memoir. But nursing was very different in those days too. And you couldn't go back down the country, so there was no time for a decent romance. You couldn't make a date with somebody because you couldn't keep it. You might be hitching down the road outside the Red Cow to get to Feathert, and you would get there, and then you might go into the ballroom. I remember going when Joe Dolan was playing in the ballroom. God, those were the days. Wasn't he wonderful, Joe Dolan? Anyway.
You're rekindling it all now.
I am, so you'll be sorry you asked me those. I trained as a nurse. I think it's a scandal to see Baggot Street in the condition it's in. The women and the men who worked there, the consultants, the cleaners, the nurses, all the disciplines worked as if they were looking after their own home. They had great pride of place. The weeds are growing up outside it now. And I went there when I was doing my memoir, and I came out and I said to Catherine Cleary, because a memoir could go on forever, I said, I'm going to ring Dennis O'Brien, ask him, will he buy that? Give it to me and I'll run it. And then I said, Alice, where would you get the staff? Where would you get the energy? And there it is still. I think it's truly shocking. And I think the HSE should give it over to, I understand some, and I would wish the people who bought it well, but this is something I think we are forgetting about the people, like in the Adelaide up the road and all those small. And St. Patrick's, I remember staying with Nellie Mulcahy. Not Nellie Mulcahy, I knew Nellie, who was the designer. She was a well-known woman. I knew her as well. But staying with Nellie Dwyer in John Street and cycling up to St. Patrick's to give a diabetic his injection, and they had one syringe, and you'd boil the syringe in a pot of water. And mind you, there were no infections in those days, you know. And then you'd cycle back to Feathert. Now, most people would think I'm mad. I mean, when I tell my colleagues here, you see, I think this was just a few years ago. Then I trained as a midwife in the Rotunda, and I got to know the city and Sean McDermott Street, Benburb Street. And I grew up in an environment where I felt there was no class distinction. We all helped each other, young and old, and rich and poor, and Catholic or Protestant. And that has shaped me, and that's where I am today.
We're going to have to take a very first break. I'm with Alice Leahy. We're here in the Liberties. We're back just after these. Indeed, you're very welcome back to Down Your Way. I'm here in the Liberties this week with the great Alice Leahy. Alice, there's lots of things we could talk about. We don't have time on the programme, I suppose, for lots of it. But look, we're really delighted to be here in with you, and thanks indeed for the invitation to the Liberties.
Thank you.
Yeah, tell me about the place that you're in, the premises.
Well, maybe I can just say how I got to this premises. Now, I won't go on for too long. But I was asked by the board, I went back to Bagot Street as night sister. I was the youngest night sister in the country, not a nun. And then I was asked by the board of the hospital to go to the London hospital to look at intensive care units and come back. And with the consultants to set up an intensive care unit, the first unit of its type in Ireland. And that was opened by President Childers. And he was one of the 5 presidents I've met to date. I've met we've photographed them up in the house. I haven't met the current president. Anyway, I ran the intensive care unit, and the problems were the same then as they are now. You didn't have enough nurses. You had agency nurses who didn't know what was happening. You had staff who were worn out and tired, working extremely hard. And I decided I would give it all up. And I thought about going to South America, and then I thought, no, I would go to the Simon community. And I went to the Simon community, and the conditions were terrible. Then I saw, when I was there as a nurse, there were issues that could be dealt with. And then, but not to go on for too long, I should mention, in last November, we were 50 years in existence, and we decided to document the 50 years. And I'm looking back at letters I wrote 50 years ago to the HSE and different people, and I could write the same letters today. So where have we changed? But I think the one thing that was... So this book, Outsiders, we call it, Mick Clifford, who was a wonderful Kerry man and journalist, and Mark Condren, who is, for the 7th time, has been awarded Press Photographer of the Year. Mark scanned all our material, and Mark Condren put it together. And this painting was taken of a man who comes in here. He was here this morning before he came in. He's from rural Ireland. And then the photograph was painted by Katie Channon, who's a well-known international artist. Now, that documents all our work to date. And Pat Kenny, of course, has been a wonderful supporter. We had a day in City Hall. We got City Hall, because City Hall is for all of us, and so is Dublin Castle. Our tax pays for it. And the city manager, Richard Shakespeare, gave us the premises. Pat Kenny launched our book. Michael McDowell, Senator Michael McDowell, who has been in with us and whose son did a placement with us, and our Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan, just dropped in that morning and thanked us on behalf of the government. So this brings us right up to date. Now, this should be used in all sociology discussions, but I can guarantee you not one councillor commented on it. The Lord Mayor was to come that morning, but something cropped up and he wasn't able to come. So, but I would always be hopeful. I think we have to document our history, we have to reflect on it, and we have to use it to say, where are we now as a country? I refuse to become negative. I'm lucky that I have great friends, I have great colleagues, and people like Jarlath and our Assistant Commissioner who inspire me to keep going. So I continue to keep going.
Alice, where can the book, how available is it?
Alan Hanna's have been selling it. We published this ourselves, and people can get it from here. They can check on our website, and that is aliceleahytrust.ie. I'll give you a leaflet there. But people can get it from me. It is €20. It's worth about 50, and it's €9 for postage. But and then we have given it out to our supporters and that because people are just so good to us. And there are lots of contributions from lots of people. It's a very interesting book.
It surely is. There's lots of things we could talk about here, but it's an amazing place. Even to be here this morning and to come in just off the street, off the farm from me, just from rural Ireland for the most part, and here we are in the middle of the Liberties. Did we ever realise that this had happened to down your way?
I was walking down one morning by the side of the Radisson Hotel because it's nice and quiet, and there were two men coming after me, and I could hear them saying, "Alice, your bag." And I thought, well, Alice, is your bag going? And I thought, no. And they weren't. There were two men who come in here. They slept out in different places on the south side. So I said to them, "Isn't this a lovely morning? I would love to be down the country looking out at Slieve na Mon." And then one of them said, "Well, Alice, he was from Poland." He said, "You know, the higher up the mountain you go, it's very poor. And there's a lot of poverty in the mountains." So the mountain he was talking about was very different from the mountain. I love when Louise Morrissey sings that song. Nobody can sing it like her.
Alice, you know, I have a lovely job at Tip FM, travelling from community to community across the county for the past 25 years.
25 years.
Yes, I have got lovely tea, lovely in people's kitchen, coffee, all the rest.
Barry's tea.
Absolutely the best. Right. And when I come in here to a place like that, how can I become homeless?
Very easy. Any one of us, in fact, Pat Kenny said on the back of the book, "There but for the grace of God go I." I've met people from all sections of the community. It can be something very small, but drugs have drugs have destroyed so much of what's going on. And I think what bothers me is when I meet people, even students, and you're talking about homeless people, and even people working in the sector, they're always clients, they're always rough sleepers, but these are people we're talking about. Nobody grew up wanting to be homeless. Any one of us, you could have an accident when you go out and end up with brain damage. You could end up with a mental health problem. You could have a relationship broke down. You could have. It's as long as a piece of string. And I find the whole debate at all levels now, it's about looking for money, building, and we have a huge housing problem. It is shocking. You have young people and people who are not so young who can't get housing. It is shocking. But that's for another day because we see homelessness as a much more complex issue. It's about the human condition. And where do people turn to when they're real outsiders? And that's why we wrote in our book about it. For instance, I was just looking back. If I can tell you now, this is a morning, just last Tuesday. We had 22 people in here. 2 of them were new. We just asked people. We put no information on our website. We don't pry. But we do ask people what country they came from and where they slept last night. Now, last Tuesday, the people who came to us, they slept in Hatch Street, O'Connell Street, the Ilac Centre, Bagot Street, Rathmines, the Bus Oris, Broombridge, the Custom House, the Mater Hospital, Church Street, Clontarf, Pierce Street Garda Station, Sandymount, outside the Rotunda, and Chapel Lizard. And in the month of January, we had people from 23 different countries. They came from Ireland, Latvia, Morocco, Jordan, Slovakia, Poland, Iran, Ukraine, Palestine, India, Lithuania, Brazil, France, Hungary, Pakistan, Romania, Sudan, Russia, Nigeria, Libya, South Africa, Italy, and Somalia. And of those people, we said there were 258 consultations. That's the word we use for just our interaction with people. And 10 of those were new, and 6 of them were non-Irish nationals. 215 had showers, and we gave out 194 outfits of clothes. But this isn't about giving, this is about helping somebody to face. You know, we could all go off now and we could go into the Radisson Hotel or go down to the lovely palace, and you should take a trip down there. Shouldn't they,
Yes,
Charles?
yes, I recommend it.
I see Assistant Commissioner looking at, but now it's big, and you could go into the churches, they were open, and people are afraid to leave the churches open. So we are really talking about a different time, but the needs of the people are the same, to be wanted, to be recognised, and to be made feel, yes, they do matter. And I think this is why programmes like yours are important, because they do inform people. But
they're coming here for just to freshen up for the most
well,
part.
no, we would say the most important thing, and that's why I like, there was a lovely book published the other day by the Little Museum of Dublin, and there was the Pulitzer Prize winner photographer who came in here, and also Louise East, who was living in Berlin, and they were writing about Dublin, but she wrote about us. And I must say, she came in here and she met me and all of that, but she said, looking at the people, there was something cosy about it. But these people had come from carrying their only possessions in dirty bags. So it's not, we are not a public washing facility, and we have made submissions to Dublin City Council for public washing facilities. This is a European capital city. But if you were all out today and you were drenched wet and you wanted to go someplace, they have no public showers. We can go in and pay and have a shower. They just don't get it.
We've got to take another break. We're back just after these. Oh my God. You're very welcome back to Down Your Way. I'm here in the Liberties this week with Alice Leahy, a very special guest on the programme. The Assistant Garda Commissioner is with us, Michael McElgun. Michael, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Eamon. Yeah, great to be here.
Good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You're associated in many ways and look up to, in many ways, too, what the work that Alice has been doing.
Yeah, I was the chief here in the city centre from 2021 onwards for about 3 years. And sort of when I came first, I had known of Alice by reputation, but I'd never met her. And I might have been, in my own view, an unusual choice for the job of the city centre, given most of my history over 34 years had been on various national units, investigation units, and any of the frontline policing stuff was out in the suburbs of Dublin in Finglas, Ballyfermot or Clondalkin, but I had never actually policed in the city centre. So one of the first things I was keen to do was find out who the key people in the community of the city centre were, and to meet up with them, and wasn't at all surprised to discover Alice's name at the top of that list of one of the people I should meet. So they talk about meeting your heroes, best avoided. I can encourage anybody to meet their heroes, because Alice was everything I expected, and indeed a whole lot more, in her commitment to the community of the city centre, and particularly those who are exceptionally vulnerable and in need of support.
Okay. A native of Thurles?
Yeah, I'm from Thurles. Yeah, family still down around that area.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much a part of it, and a hurling family for the most part.
Yeah, Dad, and indeed the family are very much involved in Thurles Sarsfields. A great club that does so much for the town and the community.
How do you see how homeless is going here in Dublin? Because every time you turn on the news, there's something going wrong with homelessness.
Yeah, well, look, it's the dynamic of it has changed so much in over my years in policing, and Alice is frontline, so she knows a lot more about it than I do. But the early days, it would certainly have been a lot to do with mental health and alcohol abuse. Drugs became a very significant part of it, and then the demographic of the homeless people changed so much in latter years. So Alice went through, take last Tuesday alone here, Alice, I think we talked about 22 different nationalities are coming here for support. So, and that brings a complexity to it, because you have people coming with all sorts of traumas. They are, vulnerable in terms of their capacity to communicate. And while there are lots of supports, people suffering from mental health issues don't always have the wherewithal or the will to engage with those supports. And sometimes they feel, for whatever reason, more comfortable living and sleeping rough. Sometimes that some of those people will appear on Garda stations, and whether we should or we shouldn't, I think it's appropriate that we do find a space in the doorway for them, because they at least feel a little bit safer in that environment, and they won't always go into the hostel facilities that are available for them.
It's not getting any better, is it?
Well, it's not, I guess. sometimes for me, I think it's more about thinking about the individual as opposed to the vastness of the problem. That's for others to consider and find solutions for. I look to our mission in policing. It's about keeping people safe. There's nothing in that mission that seeks to define people or put any limitation on our duty, our protective duty there. So people are all people, and we as public servants have an obligation to serve all people and to keep all people safe. So whether that is some kid who's found himself in Ireland, having come across the seas, whether he came here legally or illegally, with mental health problems living on the streets, or an Irish person who, for whatever reason, has fallen through the cracks of our society and finds themselves living rough on the streets, we have protective duty for them as well. And we serve them as well as everybody else, be that prince or pauper after that.
Okay, thanks, Michael, for the minute. Jarlath is with us. How are you doing, Jarlath?
How are you doing? I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, all the way from Tiptown.
All the way from Tiptown, yeah. I'm a townie, and I was exported to Selbridge about 42 years ago. So I would be in and out of Dublin 8 in the foundry, and I would pop into Alice and Anish Cogardas to Alice, like Quagablinig Foss. It's such a lovely little sanctuary in the middle of Dublin 8, and when you do pop in, you get your cup of tea and a biscuit, and you meet some of the clients, the visitors. And from Brendan at the gate to Jeanette in the office and all the other workers here, it's such a little oasis of peace where they can have some hygienic problems sorted out. And I would like to concur with Alice, as she said previously, there are no toilet facilities, no shower facilities in Dublin. I remember my first time coming to Dublin, I was probably 12, and there were toilets on the middle of O'Connell Street, near Pearse Street, all locked up, all knocked down. So, and Alice has continually written to the Irish Times, to councillors, looking for shower facilities, looking for some bit of dignity to be given to some of the homeless. And it's just like a waste of space and sad.
How can that be sorted?
Well, I think it just takes, you have Director of Services at Shakespeare from City Council, City Corporation. Surely they should be able to, and pay people to look after the toilets. Before they were just left open, and probably with drugs and all that, they used that as an excuse to close them down. But if you had someone there minding them, and it would be like, I was just in Paris there recently for the rugby, and there's public toilets, and it's just a shame. But meeting Alice probably 35 years ago, I'm involved in the Tipperary Association, and it was a great pleasure to award Alice Tipperary Person of the Year, and now she's been inducted to the Tipperary Hall of Fame. And no better woman, she's a saint. I'm lucky in my profession that I meet the best hurlers, the best rugby players, the best actors, actresses all over the world, in All-Stars, in IFTAs and all that kind of stuff. And I meet my heroes. But Alice is definitely hero number one, a living saint from Tibberdorn. Agus Berbua Alice.
Came all the way up with me today, Sean. You know Alice from the grown-up years.
I do indeed, Eamon, and I'm delighted to be here. I've always been inspired by Alice, and I think what has struck me when I came in here today, I've mentioned to Alice that I'd love to come up to see the place over the years, and today, of course, is when we got that opportunity. But it's the beautiful, homely atmosphere of the place. It's fantastic, and the work is so meaningful, and Alice really deserves so much credit for what she has done over the last 40 years. But I suppose my association and friendship with the Leahy family goes back a long way. I would have started off like many other young fellas and young girls did at 12 years of age, doing the bulbs and the tulips in Annisgift. It was our summers, and it was a fantastic time. Now, the work wasn't easy, but it was most enjoyable, and I think it gave us a great grounding, and shaped people maybe for what they became later on, or that. And of course, also then my mother and Alice's mother would have been great friends and played cards together a few nights a week. And one of the highlights of the year for my mother was Alice's father and mother, Jack and Henny, going down to Tramore to the races on their holidays, and they'd give maybe a week or 10 days there. But Henny would always write maybe 2 or 3 times to my mother, and she looked forward so much to those letters. And 'tis no, I suppose, surprise that Alice is an author herself now, as well as the many other things she does, because I can remember those letters myself very clearly, and they were lovely. And the last thing they made, and just before we finish, is Alice mentioned going to school through the fields. That school was Coolmine, where I live beside. It closed 50 years there a few years ago, I think in 1967, and we decided we'd have a reunion for, those that were still around that went to school. And myself, Seamus Barry and Catherine O'Connell were the last 3 to start there, so we gave a year there. But anyway, on the night we said that, it would be great to get a guest speaker, and sure, it was just a no-brainer who we were going to get, Alice. And she came that night and spoke so eloquently and gave of her time. So we're so grateful anyway. It was a beautiful time.
Lads, listen, all 3 of you guys, thanks for being with us on Down Your Way. We're going to take another break. We're back with the final part of Down Your Way with Alice, just after these. Indeed, you're very welcome back to the final part of Down Your Way. Just wondering, Alice, you gave up a full-time job. Now you went to set up this foundation.
But you see, setting up an agency, there's a tendency these days for kind of 4 people to get together and say, we'll set up an agency and that's it. We put an awful lot of work and planning into setting up the agency. And I actually have the original document. It's very tattered now, but thanks to Mark Condren, he scanned it. We spend a lot of time. I saw the health problems of people who were homeless. I also came across some wonderful doctors who were trying to deal with the people, and the two never met. So I decided, I started having, I hate the term clinics, in the Simon Shelter, and all the doctors, some of them now are retired hospital consultants, they all came and helped me. They were wonderful people. And so I then wrote a report for the HSE, and a group of us got together, and the Vincent de Paul headquarters was a tiny office across the road there in Nicholas Street. And Bob Cashman, who was from a Cork, well-known Vincent de Paul type family, and he was an official in the Department of the Environment, and he got together with David McGee, who was a doctor working with me, and then there was a woman who was very ill and hadn't long for this world, and she gave us some money, and we set up the agency trust. Now, it was called Trust, but then I think it's about, I don't know, many years ago, 10 years ago, we changed the title to the Alice Leahy Trust because there are so many trusts. But ours was the first service of a doctor and a nurse going around and visiting people sleeping rough. We hear people now talking about what they're doing now. We were doing it then 50 years ago, and I've no hesitation in saying it. And we documented the problems we came across in the lot. And our service became a model for services here and abroad. And yet we would be considered kind of a bit old-fashioned now. But there has to be common sense and get back to the basics. We operated first we had no premises. David and myself used to go around on a bicycle. We might have a row going up Patrick Street. We might stop and buy chips going down. There was a lovely chipper down the road. The whole city has changed, and we'd be sitting there in Patrick's Park with newspaper and having chips. But we were, looking back on it, we were workaholics. We were but very passionate and believed in everything we were doing. And I still do. Now, but it is very hard to get across the importance of the things we're doing now. You can have all kinds of people all kinds of experts now. I've never come across so many experts, and they all have the answer. But an awful lot of them have never sat down, like you are here today, and met some of the people who are experiencing homelessness. And often it can be, and that's why I have such huge admiration for the guards. It can be the guard who's out there on the beat, and I'm delighted to see our Deputy Commissioner, Paul Cleary, that I think he got people out there on the beat. But I think we need to support those people too, because some of them are young people who are just joining the force. But anyway, then we get no money from the state. We did in the early days. We are fully compliant with all government legislation. Every penny is accounted for and was from day one. I never signed a cheque in my life. Now, our current board of directors, we meet over in the Health Services Credit Union, and they provide the sandwiches. And the chief executive of the Health Services Credit Union, Sean Hosford, a Cork man. He's the father of Paul Hosford, the journalist. And we meet over there, and our chairman, she insists on being called chairman, and I would call her chairman too, Mael Murray-Tynan. And Mael was a well-known journalist. She was with the Press and then with the Irish Times, and she played Camogie for Bersalee, and she's our chairman. So we never send out begging letters. We never ask people for money, but we see the most amazing generosity. And if we're short of something, and we do say, even though we don't push religion or anything, 10 times a day we say the Lord works in strange ways. And one day we had a man in the shower, and he had an appointment, and he wanted to dress well. I think the appointment was with family, and all we were short of was an overcoat. And the next thing, this man came in, he said, Alice, I haven't seen you for years. He said, I remember when you used to visit the model lodging house, which was run by Dublin. He said, I bought a coat, he said, and I have no use for it. I mean, the most amazing things. So there has to be that sense of, I think we've lost the sense of, how did we all get to know each other? I think there is a mystery to the world that there's no philosophical debates, and there's a sense of mystery people are afraid to mention. And I think sometimes it's our poets and our maybe artists or people who just take the time to reflect on what it's like. Sure, no wonder there are people distressed. No wonder there's so many young people distressed, because they are so busy on their phones. They're so busy trying to do something that they're not giving themselves the time. And I think we owe it to people. What is this life is full of care? We have no time to stand and stare, you know.
You mentioned reflections and all of that. On our way in here today, we were surrounded by churches. So there must be a lot of reflection around here.
Well, you see, I'd wonder too, are they places of reflection anymore? You see, I would wonder, we're surrounded by churches. We have Christchurch, we have St. Patrick's. They're the two Protestant churches. And they might have their own little squabbles, but they're both very good to us. And then we have the Augustinians up in John's Lane. And Padraig Daly, who's a well-known poet, he's a priest there, he's from Dungarvan. But also, of course, the parish priest there now is another Tipperary man, Iggy O'Donovan. I should have asked him, Jay, but we wouldn't have room, we wouldn't have space here. And then we have Francis Street and Meath Street, they're diocesan churches. And over in Whitefriars Street, you have they're not the Dominicans, they're the Carmelites. But these were all places, you see, people are afraid now. There are huge security issues in churches. They have huge problems. And it's very hard for them very often to keep their door open. But I do wonder where we're going if the people, and the people aren't in the institutional church. I think we all would have issues maybe, but there's some wonderful people in those places, and I think they are as much outsiders now as the people we talk about, and I think we need opportunities for them to encourage debate and inspire hope.
Would you change much in your life if you would have it all over again?
Not a thing. I believe fate has led me to where I am. I have no regrets. The only thing is I don't have much time left now to continue doing this, but we'll continue doing it and continue. And I feel I've been very lucky. But I do believe all the influences in my life were important. And of course, there would have been people I met I didn't like and people who didn't like me, but that's all right. That's what the human condition is about.
Right there recently.
But you see, I think these trophies they're not just about me, they're about our message and the people we work with. And it would never go to your head if you were kind of out in RTE or News Talk, and they're all very good to us, and you come back in, because you'd soon be brought down to earth when you'd meet the people who come in here. And so I think there's something missing in Irish life. Everybody is so busy that they're not having time to reflect. And I think sometimes when they do start reflecting is maybe when there's a death or something. But there's something missing. And I think one of the things that's missing, years ago, you remember them at Jarlath, there used to be Harry Bohan, you know, the priest, he used to have these wonderful gatherings where you'd have discussions and you'd have people who had all kinds of ideas. We had summer schools, and I remember, I think that's where I first met Joe Duffy, was down at a summer school in Inchigeela. It was the time, do you remember the time when they're moving statues? Because it was down around. But there are none of those taking place now. Everything has become so clinical. Even if you go to something now, you are asked to present the question you're going to ask, so that the person up there isn't going to be embarrassed. And of course, we've Zoom now, where there's no human contact. So I think, and I don't know where that's going to come from. I don't know. Now, but we have been looking at how we were going to run an essay competition again, and I was going to ask Mary, Charlotte's wife, to help us with it, but we decided no, it would be too much work. But we are looking at something we might be able to do this year to bring people together to kind of reflect on what you're saying there. We'd have no difficulty getting premises. We'd have no, but that's what I hope to discuss with a few people. And, because you'd be getting, even at when we had this up in City Hall, I mean, we had a motley group of people. We had a huge group of people who came. It was wonderful. And, but we had just a few speakers. We had Michael McDowell, of course, we had Pat Kenny, who's been wonderful to us over the years. We had Assistant Commissioner McElgun and the Deputy Commissioner and the Chief Superintendent of area. They came, and they're the kind of people you want. And Patrick Daly, who's a poet, and because poets challenge us, and there is no philosophical debate. And then I'm going out to a church in Brackenstown. I don't know why I said I'd go out, but anyway, I'm going out because I think sometimes when you go into a church, the sitting can be cold and there's no discussion and you're kind of all singing from the same hymn sheet. So I think education isn't just about, people say to me, the number of people who say to me, you didn't this, I'm going through the University of Life. And the University of Life, I think, is the most important university of all. And you keep working through it until it's time to go up to the clouds or wherever you go.
It's a real pleasure on behalf of TIP FM to be here in your premises. Absolutely terrific. Well done. And congratulations on all your success.
What will it end up like? Thank you all very. It's lovely having so many Tipperary people here. And it is a special place, Tipperary. It is. And as you mentioned, the GAA, Ronan Maher, I was in Templemore just before he came out, he graduated or whatever they do, there's a word for it. And I met him again then outside the palace when he had the club. And those young men, that's when you wish you were a bit younger.
Terrific.
They're gorgeous.
So that's my lot for this week. My thanks to all our guests on this week's programme. A special guest, of course, was Alice Leahy. Every success story into the future. Until next week, have a very good week. Bye-bye.
Alone, all alone, right away was strand, all alone in a crowded hall.
So that's our programme for this week. My thanks to all our guests on this week's edition of Down Your Way. So until next week, we leave you. Until next time, here we go.
That are gone.